everyone. Welcome into the Her Hoop Stats podcast. It is Monday, March 30th. We are approaching the end of March. We'll hit the end of March before we get to the end of March Madness, fortunately. But man, if you want to kind of encapsulate the madness that is March, that would have been this weekend. I'm Jamie Steyer Johnson alongside Brittany Carper, and very much madness this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we were treated to some really special games, and a couple buzzer beaters and things that the moments you remember, and just a really great weekend, I think, for women's basketball.
Oh, no question whatsoever. First of all, great to be able to watch the games pretty consistently, because unlike the men's side, the men kind of subscribe to, I think, the WNBA method of scheduling this year, where they're scheduling them overlapping and having tip times at 9-10 o'clock Central Time. I get the locations of the sites and such kind of make it that way, but yeah, I was really happy then when you look at the scheduling for the women and it's like, nope, I'm going to watch game after game after game after game, like 4 right in a row. You get a little bit of a break in between the different sites, especially, but the scheduling was great. And thank goodness, because you needed to be locked in on every single one of these games. We'll start with the headline. That is, we're mostly going to stick with the Sweet 16 today. There's 2 more Elite 8 games today, and we're going to have, potentially some instant reaction tonight. We'll certainly have the Gower Hour tomorrow, and so we're going to leave most of the Elite 8 to them. We're going to focus in on the Sweet 16, and because you can't really skip over that part. Duke over LSU. Buzzer beater. I just said before we started recording, one of the craziest shots I've ever seen. Not just like, oh, it's a buzzer beater, right, and it's a tough shot and it's on an inbounds and blah, 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 blah. Like physics wise, the fact that it sits there and hangs on the rim, I will try to stay away from getting too into the weeds on this, but I think there might be something to Gino's theory of the rims being pretty tight, because you see that there was some shots in their game against Notre Dame where the ball was literally just hanging on the rim in a way that like shouldn't be possible. Like it's just fully sitting there. But for Duke, it worked in their favor. Ashley Jackson with the 3-pointer to win it. First buzzer beater 3-pointer in the tournament since Arike Gumbawale. I mean, just an unbelievable shot to cap off a crazy, crazy game.
Yeah, and I think that shot obviously propelled Duke, but man, that would have been an absolutely devastating defeat for that Duke team. They were up 9 late in that game. LSU goes on that 10-0 run, and you feel like, if you're a Blue Devil fan, this game is slipping away from us. And then that shot goes in, I think, like 4 times maybe around and in, which, like you said, is crazy. But in all honesty, Duke deserved to win that game. And so sometimes, I know if you're a LSU Tiger fan, that's a hard pill to swallow. But for the majority of that fourth quarter, they really took control of the game. Credit to LSU for fighting back and hitting some really big shots. I mean, Michaela Williams was really good in that game for LSU. I think Malaysia Fulwiley, she ended up with 28. What you're going to remember probably the most, if you're a Tiger fan, was that steal and miss layup, late in the game for them. But, I just think those are 2 teams, like when you're talking about a Sweet 16 trying to get to the Elite 8, those are the games like you expect to see, right? Like they're so evenly matched, and they were all laying it out on the line. And obviously we don't have a rooting interest in that game, so it's nice to just be able to sit back and enjoy the game without feeling every miss or make is a magnitude shot and swing of emotions. But we were just treated to a really good women's basketball game.
Yeah, I was extremely impressed with, as you said, just the overall performance of Duke and then the composure of LSU to make that push down the stretch. Huge credit to, I mean, really both teams keep themselves in there. Mylasia Fulwiley, as you said, especially early in the game, came in for LSU, as she's done all year, provided a spark off the bench. But man, especially early, she wasn't just a spark. Like, she was the whole fire. She was the only one that could get anything going for a while. And she's the one who really kept it from potentially getting out of hand in Duke's favor, because you see the way that game started, and it very nearly did get out of hand right off the bat. And so she came in, and I felt like she played with the energy that we're used to seeing from her, but she made the big shots that she needed to keep them in it. And then, as you said, some tough misses down the stretch, but ultimately, I mean, it's so much is about what Duke was able to do, because I don't think that it was so much LSU letting a game slip away. As you said, Duke's the one that was in control. It was a great effort from LSU to push back. I thought it was really impressive to only have 11 turnovers against a Duke team that does such a great job of forcing those bad decisions. They had only 11 turnovers, and they shot over 45% from the floor. So it's not like they were just chucking up shots and hoping they go in. Like, they were able to get their offense moving. But what Duke was able to do, I mean, 20 offensive rebounds. Like, how often are you going to lose a game getting 20 offensive rebounds? And so just the fact that they were able to fight, keep themselves alive, even with, you mentioned the missed layup on LSU's end. You've got missed free throws on Duke's end that very nearly could have doomed them. And then Ashton Jackson's able to go ahead and redeem herself. Overall, they shot significantly better than we're used to seeing Duke shoot at the free throw line. So 18 to 23 in the game. But it was really interesting that the margin in the game ended up being the margin in free throw makes. 18 free throw makes for Duke, 16 for LSU. The difference being that LSU went 16 of 17. They just weren't able to get themselves to the free throw line quite as much. And I felt that kind of bore out what we saw in the pattern of the game, where Duke was able to be so aggressive. And when you get that many second, third, fourth chance opportunities, you're going to draw a lot of fouls.
Yeah, and I think that was maybe a little bit of the Achilles heel all year for this LSU team, was just not really. I think their bigs made a ton of improvement as the season went on, but just those reliable presence that we usually expect from LSU teams. And I think that was the big difference in this game. I thought Toby Fournier was really good, really tough for Duke as well inside. But like you said, it's kind of those little things, the extra chances that they gave themselves, getting to the free throw line, and those add up, especially in a really close game. And then I think, obviously saying goodbye to a player in Flau'jae Johnson that, we have had the pleasure to watch over the course of her LSU career, and certainly not the way she wanted to go out. But I think, for all of us that have enjoyed watching her, we'll certainly be excited, to see her at the next level as well.
Yeah, I mean, we finally get to confidently say you'll get a draft here coming up soon. We can see you next year, and so definitely or not next year, like next month.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to, right. At this point, it's going to be here before we know it. So, and I think that's always the tough part about March is, the end of so many college careers that we have all followed and have enjoyed watching is, there's the finality of it too. And that's really what we're, creeping up on now is as these games wind down is the finality of so many, really, really bright stars that have helped propel the game forward.
And let's kind of shift gears here, and we can talk about a team that has some players that a couple teams that have some players that are finishing up their college career, but are really reliant on some young players. And so let's look at Notre Dame and Vanderbilt. This was another one of the closest games of the Sweet 16. Just again, an unbelievable battle. Vanderbilt came up just a little bit short, but a great season, far beyond, I think, what most people anticipated for them as a team. Michaela Blake showed, yes, she is a star. She is continuing to rise, but the way that they were able to put it together and come together as a team, the addition of Aubrey Galvin obviously was the big catalyst in getting them to take that next step forward, which I think is probably one of the best age takes we've maybe ever had on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Is you specifically calling that out coming into the season is, hey, people don't really know Aubrey Galvin, but I've watched her for a long time, and I think she's gonna do something. And whatever we said at that point, understated it because her impact was tremendous over the course of the season and in this game against Notre Dame. Without what she did, there's not a fighting chance in this game.
Right, yeah, they're not even in this game without Aubrey Galvin, and that's really been the story for that Vanderbilt team all year is when you have someone that can complement the play of Michaela Blakes, like you said, and really just have that steady presence. I think, you look and she had 3 assists, 6 turnovers, but against a defense in Notre Dame, especially a defensive menace as Hannah Hidalgo is, for a freshman to be on that stage and really, show up the way that she did, I think if you're a Vanderbilt Commodore fan, you are just excited about what that looks like because I think, everyone who talked after that game, they talked so highly of, Coach Shea Ralph. And I think, you feel like that program is a program that is going to continue getting better and moving forward and adding the pieces that they need to. But yeah, like you said, I mean, Aubrey Galvin was that player that nobody really knew about, because she wasn't, highly sought after out of high school. But I think that's the beauty of recruiting, and especially in this day and age, is that if you find someone, and you're talking about a coach in Shea Ralph that obviously has played at the highest level at the best program that can do that and identify that. And for her and her staff to go out and, really say, like, hey, this kid, no matter what it looks like next to her name, the stars or whatever, is going to impact our program and be the person that we need. And for that to come to fruition, I mean, if you are a Vanderbilt fan, you have to feel really good about that. And you have to be excited what that looks like in the future for what they bring in too, because I think, again, you're seeing that they can identify the talent and as a team that's only going to get better.
And I mean, it's not like Michaela Blakes was coming in and people were saying she's going to be the one that's out there scoring 40, 50 points a game
Right.
as a freshman either. And so obviously they've shown that their ability to scout talent, identify talent is tremendous. And then being able to fill in those pieces around them. There's some players in their rotation that have been there for a couple of years. There's some that came in through the transfer portal. The next step for them is obviously just going to be building out a little bit more consistent of a full rotation. And
Mhm.
that's always going to be the key for any team in this day and age where, okay, the people that have buy-in, the people that understand what their role is going to be. I think there's this perception that either it's really easy to recruit to programs that have really great star players because, well, everyone wants to play for a good team, or it's really hard to recruit to them because, well, you have these people that are going to be high volume. And the reality is very much in the middle, and it's
Mhm.
very dependent on the communication between the coach and the potential player and what the potential player wants. Like, we'll get into this in a couple weeks when we don't have these awesome games to talk about. But my thing with the transfer portal is always that I hope the people going in know what they're looking for, and then I hope they find it. But I hope you have to know what you're looking for. And there are, I think, a lot of people that will be looking for the opportunity to play alongside these elite players because that raises your ceiling along with everyone else's. In a game where, Michaela Blake scores 26 points on 26 field goal attempts. That's kind of the gold standard for a high volume player is to hold them to having to shoot as many shots
Yep.
as points that they score. And so if you get just another piece or two, you can get, I think, pretty easily to the top tier in women's basketball for Vanderbilt. They took the
Yep.
next step up this year, and especially with Blake still having a couple years left, with Galvin just being a freshman, I think that they will continue and they will take that next step up. They're obviously very bought in, and so just a very exciting season for them for what's ahead. And looking at Notre Dame, then you're talking about a team that first of all has the engine of Hannah Hidalgo, and that is unbelievable. What really gave them the boost in this game and what they struggled with in their next game was having other contributors. So you had Cass Prosper able to step up and give those 15 points, getting to the free throw line consistently, for Cass has been big. And then you had several players coming in, and able to contribute. When you are a Notre Dame team that barely plays 7 people, if you get nearly 30 minutes off the bench of play, in a win, that's pretty good. And so to have KK Bransford come in and to have her, throw in a couple points, have a couple rebounds, not really get into foul trouble, like you'll take that any day. And so both of these teams, I think, are in a similar situation as far as just needing another couple pieces. Like they don't need a focal point. They've got the focal point. They have the scheme. It's just going to be about filling out those other spaces. And it certainly seems like it'd be an attractive place to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're looking at Hannah Hidalgo's stat line from that game, 31 points, 11 rebounds, 10 steals, 7 assists. I mean, you talk about a player that can will their team to pretty much the pinnacle of what they could be this year. And I think that it absolutely happened for this Notre Dame team. I'm not sure they could have got much more out of their season than what they did. And she is the sole reason behind that. I mean, I don't think that's a secret. I think anyone that played with her would say the same thing. They were going to go as far as she could take them. And that's going to be a really important offseason for this Notre Dame team. They have a very heralded freshman class coming in, but we know what freshmen are like in the college game. There's some ups and downs, and it's how fast do they adjust. And so it's going to be really important in this offseason that, like you said, identifying the pieces. And like you said, we'll get into this as well in a couple weeks when we don't have games to talk about, but it's also important from the other side of roster construction, from the coaching side of that, that you identify players that fit what you need and not just someone that has the stats or the numbers or the flash, because it matters. It's all about putting the perfect puzzle together. And if those pieces don't fit, you're going to see, like we have across the landscape of college basketball, rosters that just don't pan out because they don't fit together. And so I think what this Notre Dame team will do, and I have no doubt Coach Neil Ivey and her staff will, is finding the critical pieces that will take, this team to the next step, because there was a lot of questions surrounding this Notre Dame team in the offseason. And again, I don't think they could go much further than they did. I mean, they squeezed every inch out of that team. And I think that's a credit to obviously the staff and the players that were involved there and believing in what they could do. And I think this next offseason, you're going to see more pieces added that complement the player that Hannah Hidalgo is. And then we're going to see them, be in a position to make, I think, a jump again, past what they did this season.
Absolutely. The big thing will be for sure being able to just have a little bit more depth. And that's something they've run into in the past couple of years. And a lot of that due to, injuries, in some cases, just freak sequences of so many people getting hurt. And so being able to continue developing the players they do have there and then adding a couple, the potential is certainly high. All right, those are, I feel like, kind of the top couple games just because of how close they were. So let's jump around a little bit, hit on some of the other Sweet 16 games, some of our takeaways there. I'll start with Minnesota and UCLA. For me, the big thing I keep looking at with UCLA is they haven't shot under 50% from the floor in this tournament. I mean, they're so good in really every facet of the game, but they've been terrific offensively, and especially against a Minnesota team that, just likes to scrap. They're going to fight and claw their way through any game. That's why they got to the point that they did in the season. And especially, you talk about a team that maybe didn't have as high of expectations for them coming into this season. Certainly Minnesota would fall into that category, and they flew really under the radar basically the entirety of this season. It was at the very end because of their net rating and because of the fact that they were able to get a couple opportunities down the stretch to prove what they had been doing all year, that they were able to host and finally get a little bit of that recognition, but just ran into an absolute buzzsaw in UCLA because the balance that we're seeing from them is tremendous. Kiki Rice, 21 points in that game. And Lauren Betts, 16 points for her, 7 of 9, kind of quiet, but I feel like we've seen some stretches where she's been the most dominant, the most aggressive we've seen of her in her entire time at UCLA. And once they need her to turn that on for the entirety of a game, which I think is probably coming, I'm really excited to see that because it hasn't been necessary yet. So why do it? But we are seeing those flashes.
Yeah, I think this year she's just surrounded by so many options and, players that are playing so confidently. And when you have a team surrounding a player like Lauren Betts that's playing confidently, that, believes in what they're doing and in each other, they played together, for the most part, this core group of players have been together. And so they've had the experience, they understand their mission. And I think this UCLA team is just going to be a hard out because of that. Now the one thing you can knock on in this game against Minnesota is they went 4 of 16 from the 3-point line. So it will be interesting to see if that is, an area that could come up to bite them if you're able to kind of limit what they do in the paint. But when you have the size and experience that UCLA does, that's hard to imagine a scenario where you're really taking that all the way because their guards are great at getting into the paint too. And so when you kind of have those, different options offensively, that makes it really hard. But this game, also going into the fourth quarter was an 11-point game. And so, for this Minnesota team, like you said, really flew under the radar this year. I think, we watched that incredible game against Ole Miss at the barn and, just the environments that they had and really a team, again, that a lot of their core has been together. And you saw that kind of experience propel them into the Sweet 16. They're a team that really, I think, just kind of wore down over the stretch of this game. They just didn't quite have enough. But I think, again, a team in a position, if they can find some pieces, you're not going to be surprised to see them back in that same spot next year because, again, they do have a core of players that I think, will be ready and willing to answer that challenge next year. But this UCLA team, I think, they, like we've said all year, just the depth. And it's just when you talk about a 6-man, in your tournament making the all region team, that what are you supposed to do when, and so that's, I think just, again, a credit to what, UCLA has done this year and the ability of, the next 2 games, what they still have the opportunity to do.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. That's a great point of you have your first player off the bench. Should they're making the all region deal. Like that doesn't happen. Just to be able to have that coming in, to have that kind of spark and to have people that are that bought in, that subscribe to their role on the team where she's cool with that. That ain't a problem whatsoever. And it definitely speaks highly to kind of the culture of UCLA. And that's how you get to this point for sure.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if you saw the presser after Jamie. She was she was asked, I think, about coming off the bench this year and said she went to Coach Corey Close and said, I'm okay with that. Like, I know that this is what this team needs. I don't want it to be a distraction of who's starting and who's not. And like you said, that's why they're successful because they are able to put the we over the me. And, they all are capable players, but they understand the greater mission. And that is what they, to win a national championship. And I think we've seen that all year from this UCLA team is a team that is united, driven by one goal, and that's to go win the national championship.
We've talked about a couple teams that maybe flew under the radar, maybe exceeded expectations in some ways. None so any more than the Cinderella of the tournament, the Virginia Cavaliers. Came up short against TCU in the Sweet 16, but man, gave them all they could handle. That's for sure. I was extremely impressed with this game. I was extremely impressed with every game of Virginia's in this tournament to be able to go from first 4 to Sweet 16, first team to ever do that, to have to go through an overtime and a double overtime game on the road in a hostile environment. Huge kudos to Virginia for what they did this year. I certainly wouldn't have picked them as far as the streak that they had, but of any team to do it, that doesn't surprise me, especially down the stretch. I watched Virginia. We saw some really great performances from them. They beat Notre Dame in the regular season. They've put together some great pieces for them. The really tough thing, I think, is some of the players that they're going to be losing to graduation. Paris Clark, obviously, really, really crucial for them. Caitlin Weimar was a big boost. Didn't have like gaudy stats, but just her
Mm-hmm.
length, her capability in any given point in time. She's someone who can impact the game in so many levels. It had to fight through so much adversity through injuries and things to be able to play again this year. And so those are certainly going to be some great losses for them. But Kamora Johnson just continues to improve. I think that again, just like everything we keep talking about, is there's these teams that are just on the fringe of different levels of play. Virginia is obviously on the fringe of a little bit of a different level than like the Vanderbilts that we talk about and things like that, but they are right there ready to, I think, take a big step forward. It's just about continuing to develop what they have, maybe add some pieces, but what they have developed so far has been so terrific. They really put up a great fight, and it took, again, not something we haven't seen before, but unbelievable individual performances from both Marta Suarez and Olivia Miles to be able to get the Horned Frogs into the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I mean, without those 2 performing the way they did, that probably is a very different outcome of that game, but we've also been accustomed to those 2 performing at a very high level for this TCU team, but I think, the note on Virginia, I would say, is going into next season, just more consistency, right?
Mhm.
So there's avoiding that play-in game, they're getting a better seed, and I think when you have a piece like Kamora Johnson to build around going into this off season after the run you had, certainly I think you can add some pieces that are going to, help in that consistency during the regular season. So you're in a better position come this tournament. But what Mark Campbell's done at TCU, I don't, I think we talk about it, but when you really look into it, it's pretty special what he's been able to accomplish there. With really new faces every year,
Mhm.
which I think again we are going to see more often than not in this day of college basketball. But again, he's been able to identify pieces where they can come in, they play within what he's asking them to do, and then they excel at it. And Olivia Miles and Marta Suarez are 2 players that are just the epitome of what TCU has become in this day and age. And, it's going to be really interesting in their next game if you're able to slow them down some, because that is what you have to do to defeat TCU, is find a way to contain one of those players, I think. And if you're able to do that, you're in a pretty good position to win, because when you go and you look up and down that roster, only 3 other players scored outside of them, that played, and they're not a deep team either. And so when you're looking off the bench, you get 9 minutes out of 2 players. And so, I think again, that's obviously easier said than done from our position in terms of slowing them down. But hats off to both of those players, because I think they are having incredible seasons, and now you're seeing it on the biggest stage for that TCU team.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth as far as just the depth for TCU only getting, those 9 minutes, as you said, off the bench in that game. It does limit you in a lot of ways. And so they've been able to get contributions off the bench at times, just not consistently, and I don't think against this level of competition. And so it ends up being so much on the starters. And when you have these great games from Suarez and Miles, then all right, then you can win a lot of games. But the issue then becomes against teams that are a little bit more defensive, are a little bit more versatile defensively. Then what do you do if you don't have Olivia Miles shooting 11 of 14? If
Mhm.
you don't have Marta Suarez able to get 25 good looks and going 4 of 7 from 3, because you have Donovan Hunter that played all 40 minutes, went 0-4 from the floor, which again, yeah, that's a lot of minutes, and that's not a lot of shots. But at a certain point, you may need more shots from other sources. Clara Silva, 4 of 8 for 8 points. Taylor Bigby, 3 of 8 for 8 points. And so all 3 of those, other starters outside of the 2 that we see consistently producing are so capable of producing, especially Taylor Bigby and Donovan Hunter. They just have that maturity. They've been in these kind of situations before. This is their second year at TCU as opposed to their first for most of the rest of the team. And so they're the ones that I think are going to be the most important going forward, because other teams are going to be so keyed in on Suarez and Miles, and they can still put up really gaudy stat lines. But if they can get even a little bit more from the rest of the cast, that will potentially be enough to put them up and over in some tight games. If it's not there, they're, I think, really going to struggle, just because most of the rest of these teams do have a little bit more of that versatility, a lot more as far as options go.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we're going to see that tonight against South Carolina. Is I would imagine the scout from Don Staley is to not let those two players beat you, and so you're going to have to see some role players for TCU really step up. I think for them to honestly have even a chance in that game. I think I'm not saying they don't, but a very tall task in a South Carolina team that is playing really well and is shooting the ball well. And so I think that is going to be very interesting to see tonight what that looks like on the defensive side of the ball for South Carolina, because we know that those are the two important pieces you have to take away from TCU. So can those other role players step up and make a significant impact in the game? That's going to be the big question mark for the Horned Frogs.
So let's talk about that for South Carolina. South Carolina beat Oklahoma 94-68. And as has been noted in several instances, the 3-point shooting in this tournament has not been exactly stellar. We've seen 17. We've seen several performances where teams are shooting under 20%, some under 10. It's not been great. A lot of that discussion, there's a lot of things that go into it, as Muffet McGraw mentioned on one of the game shows the other day. Like, no one's shot as well since they moved the 3-point line back again. That was part of the point, just trying to avoid getting to the point where just flinging it is the only viable option offensively. And so, whatever the goal was, there's been certainly a shift in that shooting percentage. But Gino Auriemma made the point that, a lot of teams are shooting poorly, and he doesn't think it's a coincidence that you're bringing in equipment that hasn't been broken in, hasn't been used, both the hoops and the basketballs. And as we noted, we've seen some things that just don't really happen with the way that the ball is hanging on the rim and things like that. To me, whether you think that it's the primary cause or not, you would want people to be able to have the best performance possible. And so drastically shifting the equipment that's being used, just having equipment that isn't broken in versus the rest of the season, it makes some kind of an impact. Whether you can solely attribute it to that or not is kind of besides the point. I think that the NCAA should have an official ball. I think everyone should use the same ball for every game for the entire season. I think it's actually crazy that we don't. It's kind of like, to me, if you had to wear the shoes of whatever brand a school worked with when you were on the road, as far as the level of impact it can have. But I digress from all of that, because if there is a counterpoint to all of this, it is South Carolina going 10 of 14 from 3 against Oklahoma. Unbelievable shooting performance. And it's not like you have one person who went out there and went, 7 for 9. It was coming from all over. It was coming from their guards. It was coming from the post. Medina Okot stepped out, knocked down another 3. And we got Tournament Tessa 2 of 2 from the 3-point line, 6 of 8 from the floor. Tanai Latson reminding people who she is, 4 of 4 from the 3, 7 of 11 from the floor for 28 points. Absolutely exploded. I mean, you talk about wanting to play your best basketball in March. South Carolina, this is it. All of this in a game where Joyce Edwards scores 8 points, only goes 3 of 13 from the floor. That's your general go-to player, and you still have absolute, utter domination. This is a deadly South Carolina team.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie, if they shoot 10 of 14 from the 3-point line, I don't know that there's a team that is going to beat them if they shoot that well. I think, again, you're talking about a player in Tanaya Latson who was leading the country in scoring at Florida State. I mean, and I think she's battled some injuries this year, but when you watch her now, like she looks like the Tanaya Latson I think that were accustomed to seeing. I feel like she finally has that kind of pep in her step, that little motor. And I mean, you're talking about a team that has experience. I mean, they looked so good against Oklahoma. You kind of run out of words to describe what that performance was. But you're right. I mean, they just were like, what equipment, what balls, we're gonna go out here and shoot it. And I do think there is something to be said about the balls and the equipment, the schedules that happen in the postseason. I think Gino's press conference, he's able to say a lot of things that people want to say and aren't able to say, but he can pretty much sit in front of a microphone and spew whatever he's going to, because people are going to listen. And I do think there's a lot of points that he made, that are very valid and that need to be heard. And obviously, I think the game is always open to being tweaked and the schedules and things like that. But South Carolina was like, we don't know what you're talking about, and really they might have been the team that had the bet. I mean, I don't know that anyone else was even close to shooting that in these games, as well as they
certainly
have.
not in this second weekend.
Right.
I would have to go back to the first, but certainly not even close. I don't know that anyone else, I don't think anyone else even shot 50% from three,
Right.
let alone
Yeah.
over 70.
Yeah, 71%. Yeah. So I think that was, just when you're watching that game and South Carolina shooting the ball like that, there's not really a whole lot you can do if you're on the other end of it, in my opinion. I think that they're a team that they have so many different weapons that when they are playing at that high a level and shooting the ball that well, they are very, very hard to beat.
And, South Carolina wasn't really taking the bait on, if this is a revenge game, whatever. But that there's something to prove when you've played a team in the regular season. I think it was the same for Duke and LSU, where you have a game that you don't perform the way you want to. It doesn't have the result that you want to. And now you have an opportunity to rectify it. And boy, did they. For Oklahoma, it's going to be tough. Really big changes for them coming next year with Peyton Verhulst and Reagan Beers gone. Definitely tough just to see. I think especially for Reagan Beers to go out on a game where you get 9 shots. And we've seen that sometimes where maybe she's limited by foul trouble or just not playing as many minutes. She played 31 minutes in the game. And so obviously South Carolina, an unbelievable defensive team. They have players that can really defend in the post. And so, you're not going to force it. But I just felt like that was something of a bugaboo for Oklahoma this year, was getting more shots spread around, especially to someone like Reagan Beers, who does have such great touch around the rim, does have such great ability inside. And so that's definitely going to be, I think, a little bit tough to swallow there. Aaliyah Chavez, I mean, a freshman, she's developing. She's shown that she's ready for the bright light. She certainly was in their first meeting, and she put a lot on her shoulders in this game. And as we said before, kind of the barometer for these high volume players, 21 points on 21 field goal attempts. So I think South Carolina's got to be really happy with that. She sounds really motivated to come back strong next year. And they do have some young players that will continue to develop alongside her. I mean, Zaya Van's been really, really impressive to me, especially for having watched her sister for so many years. Just the fact that there's such different people, such different types of players, but make such impressive impact. Like, Skylar was just someone who, she was going to do whatever she could at any given point in time. And she just was kind of the tweener where, she had the physicality to play in the post. She had some skills on the perimeter. And Zaya has such a similar attitude in such a different build where, she's smaller. She's more of a guard, but, she's going to get in there and scrap. She's going to go in there and, snag an offensive rebound where you're like, where did that come from? And so I think that what they have there certainly is going to be really interesting to watch going forward. But another one of those situations where you simply run into a buzzsaw in South Carolina, because we're not even getting into the contributions off the bench. You have Agat McGear coming in, playing nearly 30 minutes. Alicia Tornabees is getting her feet under her, able to get some of those shots in there. And man, it's one of those where it's a pretty strong defeat, and so that's going to be tough for Oklahoma, but I think it's a lot more about South Carolina than it is about them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know that there's much, Oklahoma could have done in a game like that where South Carolina is playing at that level. Like you said, I think there were games where Beers probably deserved more touches for that Oklahoma team. It would have been very interesting to see her and Chavez in year 2 together, if that would look a little different. I think that's always hard when you're trying to, bring in a freshman it's such a heralded recruit and plays the way that Chavez does. I would have been interested to see what that looks like. But I also think this OU team, and I think when they maximize what they really do offensively, is going back and finding those stretch 4s and 5s that can shoot the 3. And that was something that Reagan Beers, was not her strong suit, to no fault of her own. I mean, she was so good around the rim, but we all know the way that Coach Jenny Bronchek, her style of basketball. And I think when they are at their best is when they have everyone on the court that can stretch you and really knock it down from the outside. And so I think that would probably be a priority for this Oklahoma team in the offseason, is to continue to find the players that I think can, play inside and out for them, because I think that's when they really maximize what they're good at offensively.
Absolutely. All right. We're getting long. We're getting into 40 minutes. We're going to hit these last 3 games here. We'll go first to the other SEC on SEC matchup. We saw Texas and Kentucky 76-54 win in favor of Texas. Man, the hype for Kentucky does a lot for them in a lot of games. And they certainly needed it in this one. 16 points for Claire Strack, 10 for Tiani Key. Asia Boone coming in and getting them another 11 was really big. But just another one of those games, not a whole lot coming in off the bench for Kentucky, and running up against a Texas team that another team that is just the 1 seeds are playing like 1 seeds. Yep. I don't think you can really put it any other way. They have been so impressive. Great balance. Both Madison Booker and Rory Harmon going 50% from the floor. Jordan Lee, their leading scorer, over 50%, over 60%, 18 points for her. I feel like they've been able to get a lot of people into really good positions. I mean, shoot, the entirety of the starting lineup was hitting their shots in a huge way, because Bria Cunningham, she's someone who plays about half the minutes usually, but she's the one who starts the game. Made all 4 of her field goals, had 5 rebounds in just over 20 minutes. Like, they are really rotating their players in and out really well. They're able to give really different looks, and then ultimately they hang their hat on the defensive end. And boy, do they forced 24 turnovers for Kentucky. It's gonna be hard when you're shooting that many fewer shots, because you're turning it over that many times. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
Right. I mean, if Texas turns you over 24 times and is that efficient on the offensive end, they're going to be really hard to beat, because that is their DNA. That is who they are. That is what they hang their hat on. And I just think, like you said, the 1 seeds are playing at such a high level, and they're being really efficient. I think, really outside, I think UConn by their standards hasn't been as efficient as they normally are. But when you look at all the other 1 seeds, I mean, their efficiency has been there. And when you're that efficient and you're already that good, that is going to pose a major problem for their opponents, because they just haven't shown a lot of weaknesses, I think, up until this point of the tournament. And, like you said, Texas is getting contributions across the board. And it's not just Madison Booker. It's not, some help from Rory Harmon or Jordan Lee. It's up and down the lineup. And that Texas team, if they're going to do that, and like you said, force 24 turnovers and guard you, it's just going to make it really hard on an opponent to beat that Texas team.
One thing I will highlight for Texas in this matchup, they were 5 of 15 from the free throw line. 2 of those makes came from the end of their bench. Sarah Graves, who was in the game, there was a foul that was upgraded, so they got to choose whoever and opted to have her shoot them. She's a fan favorite. Her family was there because her sister plays for Louisville, so that was a big day for them. But those are the 2 makes that came in off the bench, the only 2 attempts that came off the bench. So their starters, their starters plus 6 player, Kyla Oldacre, was in there as well. 3 of 13 from the free throw line. And that's just not going to cut it against a little bit higher level competition that they're going to be seeing here. So I would anticipate they probably are shooting a couple free throws here in practice.
I would assume so, yeah.
So let's turn to the last 1 seed. As you said, UConn, another team that's been playing well, but perhaps not quite as efficient as they are used to doing. In their game against North Carolina, won 63-42, which is, on the one hand, a 20-point victory. On the other hand, just over 60 points for UConn is just not anywhere remotely close to what we are used to seeing from them. Certainly saw some major struggles to start the game, which is, oddly enough, not the first time we've seen that in this tournament. It sounds weird to say that they struggled a little bit to start against UTSA, but I mean, by their standards, they did. They had a couple of early fouls that took Izzy Fudd and KK Arnold out of the game. They, just weren't seeing some shots go down that they generally would see. And against UTSA, it didn't really matter. Against North Carolina, it meant that they went into the first quarter break down 11-12. And so it definitely is interesting. We've seen these like little stretches from teams where it feels like, well, maybe there's some susceptibility here, where it kind of goes back to what I've been saying, which is that I don't think there's anyone in this tournament who's infallible. There's been a lot of discourse, as always, about anything and everything, but the inevitability of UConn, or how incredible the SEC is, and so on and so forth. But it really is, you have to play the game, because we've seen that from UCLA. We've seen that from, there's some things that Texas hasn't done perfectly. And we've seen it from, maybe to a lesser extent, from South Carolina. But UConn here, definitely some struggles out of the gate. They turn it around in the second quarter, and then they just flatten everything in the third. A 20-5 third quarter allows them to rest most of their primary rotation, most of their starters in the fourth. They did what they had to do. I think that bouncing back after a tough start says a lot about a team. And so for North Carolina, a lot of credit to them for making things difficult defensively, for doing what they had to do to keep things close early on. But ultimately, just did not have the horses to stick with UConn.
Well, and I think what doesn't get talked enough about this Connecticut team is the way they guard. And so they can struggle and struggle. And like you said, that first quarter ends, and they played very poorly on the offensive end. Again, credit to North Carolina's defense in that first quarter, but then you look up and they're only down 1 point. And for that Connecticut team, that, to them, that isn't anything. And when you look at the final numbers, North Carolina shot 28%, 18% from the three. They had 24 turnovers. And so whatever it looks like on the offensive side of the ball for Connecticut, what they never give you is easy baskets on the other end. And they make their opponent's life very difficult on that end. And for a team that can have the ebbs and the flows offensively, which this team does, and they have this season, just because of who they are and their makeup this year of this Connecticut team, they are going to have that. But what they're so relentless on the defensive end, their rotations, the way they guard the ball, the way they pressure you into forcing you to do things that make you uncomfortable. And that's why they're in games. And then you see what happens is eventually the opponent not gives in, but it makes you're tired, and you're staying in this game. And then that's why you see their third quarter differential is so strong, because it's just this relentless defensive intensity that this Connecticut team has that I think doesn't get talked about enough, because we're so used to them scoring so many points. And But what they do is they guard you. They flat out guard you, and they make your life very difficult on that end. And that's why they're back into the Final Four for the 17th out of the 18th year, his 25th, which is incredible when you just think about that in terms of like how hard it is to get there, and something that Connecticut, program is just used to doing. But I think it is solely this season. They will win if they do the national championship because of the way they guard people, and I think their offense will be there enough if that's the case. But the way they guard, I think on the defensive end is a big separator in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about Texas forcing 24 turnovers. UConn did the same while also holding them to shooting under 30% from the floor. So, and this isn't a team that, has a crazy pace of play.
Right.
UConn will absolutely get out and run, but they're perfectly fine running their stuff. And they're not sitting there, saying, well, we have to force a turnover in the first 5 seconds of the shot clock or whatever. Like, they're going to be smart. They're going to wait for their opportunity, but man, more often than not, the opportunity comes really quick. And that's why we're able to see so many of these turnovers, even if it's not going to be a crazy, crazy high paced game. So certainly a big separator, as you said. A great performance by India Navarre. Again, we see a lot of players where they're the ones who kind of keep them in it, especially early. 20 points for Navarre. Shot over 50% from the floor. Not an easy feat, again, against the caliber of defense that we see from UConn. And so certainly nothing to hang your head about there, but a tough ending there for North Carolina. Perhaps exposed maybe something that other teams will be looking to emulate down the road. I think that first quarter film is going to be watched quite a lot by the upcoming opponents for UConn, because you don't see a lot of stretches of any kind for UConn where they seem like they aren't able to do exactly what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's the beauty of this tournament is you can find stretches against opponents where you can look and see what works. And when you're getting down to the, last couple games of the season, you're throwing everything that you have. And I think that will be a really interesting look for teams to see what that first quarter looked like for the Carolina defense and how they were kind of disrupting what Connecticut wanted to do on the offensive end.
All right, let's wrap it up here with Michigan and Louisville. Another game that needed a little bit of a turnaround after the first quarter. Michigan ended up winning 71-52, but at the end of the first quarter, it was Louisville in front 15-9, and there were certainly stretches of that first where it wasn't even that close. But Michigan, you talk about, I said I don't think that anyone is inevitable, but the effort for Michigan and them competing is certainly inevitable. And in this game, just a very balanced, very complete performance from the team as a whole. Shot just under 50% from the floor. Once again, 3-point percentage brings it down a little bit. They were 4 of 13 from three, but 16 points for Silas Swords, 19 for Olivia Olson. Tayala Delphos came in off the bench with 10, went 4 of 5 from the floor, made a three. She's extending the range a little bit, and just a huge, huge game of doing everything by committee. There was not a single player with more than 9 rebounds on Michigan's team, but they had 42 as a group. Several players with multiple assists, 9 steals, 5 blocks, which is really something for them. Sofokanic and Delphos both were able to get in there and make things really difficult on the inside. And this Louisville team, I mean, again, a great individual performance from Elif Istanbuloglu. She is someone who has been so exciting to watch develop, and, contributions outside of that, but they just couldn't get anything to consistently fall. And so after that first quarter, the tide turned in a really, really big way. Dominant second and third quarters for Michigan. And man, the growth that we have seen from these super sophomores on the Wolverines side. I saw them last year. They were impressive then. They've taken it to another level. Delphos coming in off the bench, I think has flown under the radar to this point. She's had some kind of breakout opportunities now. But man, to have what they do coming in addition to what they have in the starting lineup, if you have if you have a team who's able to maybe make a little bit of noise, their team that I think swings a little bit above their weight class, like they're so much better than the sum of their parts because they are so connected. It's very clearly not lip service. Like they have kind of got the hive mind thing down, and that's scary for a group that's been together for 2 years. I've been really, really impressed with Michigan over the course of this season, and that certainly continues into this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I've been high on Michigan. Just like you have seen them live last year. I thought, man, this group of freshmen, now sophomores, just a special bunch. And they were kind of my dark horse to make the Final Four. They're a game away from it now, and I just think they took a little time to settle into that Louisville game, but then once they did, it was just all Michigan from there on. And I think when you have two scorers like Swords and Olsen that can really beat you in such a variety of ways, that makes it really, really difficult for opponents. And I think when you also have someone like Holloway who can control the game the way she does so efficiently. I mean, she played 29 minutes. She only took 4 shots, but she had 7 assists. And what that does, it allows aggressive scorers like Swords and Olsen to hunt shots and to be able to play so freely on the offensive end. And then, like you said, the contribution off the bench from Del Foss. And I think that's just an area where, I still think they might be a post player away, depending, we'll see how this game goes, but that's kind of been my knock all season. But I think, again, just a group that if they aren't able to get it done this year and that core stays together and they add some pieces, a lot of talk is gonna surround this Michigan team just because of the talent that they have. But on the flip side of that, I mean, what an incredible year Louisville had. I think, definitely exceeded most expectations. I think Jeff Walls always has his teams in positions to win games and be in the conversation when it's over. And, there was a funny quote that he said from his presser about, he was asked about making Final Fours and, back to the UConn thing, he goes, well, when there's only 3 spots every year, I'm doing pretty good, and so, but I think, he's always, I think, a guy that just is so real about where he's at, where his team is at, where the game is at. I think, I think he's such a good listen for so many different reasons, but his on-court coaching and what he does with his teams, I think they're always in a position to be really successful, whether the roster looks like it or not, because he just does an incredible job of building that team up as the season goes on. And certainly a hats off job to the coaching that he did this season.
Yeah. I mean, this is a matchup between two teams that were, I think, just so much better than each individual player. And it's because they have a couple of coaches who, exactly as you said, very real, I think, very honest publicly, but I think probably pretty honest behind closed doors. And that's really what you need. And so you have players that are bought in, you have players that understand what is expected of them. And so certainly always going to be really competitive there. And Michigan, man, they're a very interesting group. Like you said, that's kind of their one knock, and this is going to be a tough matchup for them against Texas for the fact that they don't have like a true 5. They don't have a true center, and going up against the Texas team where they have not just Bray Cunningham, they have Kyla Oldacre, and then they have, so many players who are able to get inside and be physical, even if they are more perimeter players. And so I think there's going to be some difficulty there. It's going to be even more important for the guards to be really strong on the perimeter. The classic, if you can't guard one-on-one in the post, you have to make it really difficult to get the ball into the post. And tell you what, Michigan's capable of that. So very, very excited to see how that pans out tonight. Oh, there
we made it through it.
Yeah. We hit them. We got there. Man, just an unbelievable third round of the tournament. A couple of great games already in the Elite 8 round to send teams to the Final Four. We've got a couple more tonight in Texas and Michigan and South Carolina TCU. Certainly really excited about that. there's also some games outside of that. So good luck to Illinois State.
Thank
Got
you.
a big
Thank you.
one tonight there. We'll certainly be following that one as well. But man, got to enjoy every last game we've got, because as much as it seems like it's never going to happen, the season is in fact coming to a quick close.
I know. It's crazy how fast it goes. I think once you hit that October point, you blink and man, it is the end of March and April. But I think we're in for a real treat with the games we have left. And I know the Final Four, whatever that shapes up to be, is going to be incredible too. The WBIT is also happening actually right now. I think that game is on. So for sure, check it out. The WNIT is wrapping up, like you said. And so there's still a week of basketball left for all of us junkies that need to enjoy the college hoop season. So definitely find a TV and get in front to catch it.
Yeah, I got to jump up because now I got to go make sure that I'm watching that game. Really excited about the BYU Kansas. We got Wisconsin Columbia as well. So, all right, Brittany, thank you so much for joining today, for making our way through this long slate of games. Folks, you can find Brittany Carper at Brittany Carper on social media. You can find me at Jay Steyer, and most importantly, at Her Hoop Stats, wherever you get your information, whatever social media platforms you're a part of. Make sure you are subscribed to our newsletters. We've got all sorts of great info coming out there. Subscribe to the podcast. I know you're listening, watching, whatever right now, but as we mentioned, there's potentially some bonus content coming out. We'll have quite a few people live in Phoenix this coming weekend. So you don't want to miss anything that we are putting out. Timeliness is of some importance at this point of the year. So subscribe to the Her Hoop Stats podcast, and we will talk to you next time.